I apologize. My beard looks absolutely horrendous right now. My wife is not too happy. It definitely needs a trim. Um, so, 1912. That is the year this book was originally published. That is 112 years ago. Despite its age, this is a shockingly well written book. That's not to say that old books are not written well, but you get what I'm trying to say here. One of the reviews that I read of Princess of Mars said that the writing in A Princess of Mars was, quote, a bit dated at the time it was published. But after reading this book, I have no idea what that person is talking about. Uh, it's very well written, and it's shocking. It is actually as old as what it is. Uh, Many reviews have also been shocked by this. Many other reviews have been shocked by how old this book actually is, because it definitely does not feel as old as what it is. It doesn't feel like a 112-year-old book that's over a century old and now in the public domain. It has a very modern feel to it, especially when it comes to things like the technology. It does have its issues, though. It's not the perfect book. Um, for example, at some points in the book, there are entire paragraphs that seem to be missing, entire sentences that seem to be missing. And I'm not sure if that's because of uh, issues with preserving the book, because, like I said, it is an old book, and I'm not sure if it's because whoever had preserved the book and then translated it uh, online maybe had issues tracking down good versions of it, or maybe that's how it was originally written, because it is written from somebody else's point of view. It's supposed to be like a transcribed diary that somebody else transcribed. So maybe it's meant to be that way. Maybe it's not. I'm not quite sure, but it is a little weird and kind of annoying sometimes whenever you're reading and it just says they're doing something completely different than what they were just doing. You feel like you're missing uh, decently large sections of the story. Another issue that readers may have is with the language that's being used. Edgar Burroughs was born like 10 years after the Civil War ended, so he uses a lot of phrases and words that we just don't use anymore. So that might throw a few people off when it comes to reading this book, because the language being used is very old, and it's kind of hard to tell what they're talking about at times. You can kind of get it through context clues and stuff, but there are some strange words that are used, words I've never even heard of, that are used in this story. Even so, Burroughs' portrayal of technology in particular is really cool in this. He talks about things like uranium bullets, wireless pathfinders, and wireless sights and spotters used for guns, telescopes that display what they're seeing on a flat screen over great distances, and single pilot fighter flying aircraft that can fly, hundreds of miles an hour. I mean, it's really cool. This book came out like, I think, like 9 years after the Wright brothers' first flight. That's awesome. It was probably being written 8 years after the Wright brothers' first flight. So that's just really cool. The technology is really interesting in this story for how old the story actually is. Uh, there's another interesting use of technology in this book that talks about using a type of light, a color, a wavelength or something of light in such a way that it's used to regulate the oxygen and atmosphere on Mars. I just thought that was really interesting. The love story and the action is also very well written in this book. Overall, I give the book about an 8.7 out of 10. There are some shortcomings with the writing, particularly with continuity and some things that just don't make sense, especially towards the end of the book, that I had issues with. But If it wasn't for that, this book would easily be in a 9 out of 10. But I'd still say it's definitely worth the read because it feels like it was only written a few years ago. Customs have been handed down by ages of repetition, but the punishment for ignoring a custom is a matter of individual treatment by a jury of the culprit's peers. And I may say that justice seldom misses fire, but rather to rule in inverse ratio to the ascendancy of law. In one respect at least, the Martians are a happy people. They have no lawyers. And that is just one of many quotes from this book that I love so much. I think it's hilarious. I always love things that help me realize that humanity has pretty much been the same since the beginning of time. Our situations might have changed, but we still feel, similar things. Whether it's looking at old doodles of a medieval child on their homework, on their studying, or ancient phalluses scribbled on Roman architecture, or a guy 100 years ago writing about his disdain for lawyers. I think it's a really cool way of feeling connected to the past. And this is one of those examples, this guy talking crap about lawyers in a book about Martians. This quote is also one of many from Princess of Mars that show the humor of this book. There's a lot of funny things that happen in this book, a lot of humorous situations that John finds himself in. There was a couple times when I actually laughed out loud, and I wasn't expecting to laugh out loud in a book written so long ago about aliens and action and immortals and telepathy and stuff like that. But there's plenty of humor in this book that's placed in perfect moments throughout the book. It doesn't take away at all from the things that are happening. The love story is also very well done. While the Disney adaptation chose to make Deja Thoris more of a warrior archetype, the book shows the princess being more mentally strong. She's proud. She's resilient. She knows how to show her vulnerability, and she knows how to show her vulnerability, and then she's willing to sacrifice for the good of her people. Uh, and when she does show her vulnerability, it's not in like a cringy way, like an old school girl swooning at the sight of blood kind of way. There's a few times when it's a bit much, when she's being a bit, stereotypically emotional, kind of how I would have expected it to be portrayed back then. But it's not bad at all. It's only like maybe one or two moments. It's kind of like, okay, easy there. What are you doing, Burroughs? Um, but also, you can tell that Burroughs had a really good handle on like the feminine mind. John Carter treats her very well, which, considering how old this book is, I was not expecting, the strong male warrior protagonist to understand and treat a woman with respect in that way. I was expecting something more along the lines of like a doting princess, damsel in distress type character, and that's John Carter just kind of stoically standing there. Don't worry, princess, I'll rescue you. It's not that at all. I mean, he does say, don't worry, princess, I'll rescue you and stuff, but it's not portrayed in a way that I would expect something this old uh, to show that kind of relationship. John, realizes that he loves her, but he recognizes that they're both prisoners. He doesn't want to tell her how he feels or make advances towards her, specifically because they're prisoners, and he doesn't want her to feel trapped or make her situation even worse. He's basically thinking she's a prisoner right now. She doesn't want some guy saying, "Oh my gosh, I love you, by the way, and you're so beautiful, and this is great," especially the guy who is her only hope at getting out of here and getting to freedom. And he literally says, like, I don't want to make her situation any worse. This is the worst possible time that I can tell her that I love her. And we see, even in movies made today and books made today, we see that they don't consider things like that at all. Uh, so it's really cool, how old this book was, how good of a handle he had on feelings. I don't know. He tells her, even when he does get to a point where he's like, okay, I can't control myself anymore. I got to tell her that I love her. I got to confess my feelings. He tells her, that he loves her, but he stops her before she says anything. And he says, look, before you answer, no matter what it is, I don't want you to tell me until I have you safe with your people in your home. And then you can give me your answer, no matter what it is, so you don't feel pulled in one direction or the other. And she's like, okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I agree to that. Uh, he, I think the love story just overall is very well written, uh, especially for coming from such a male dominated point in time. Uh, so far as the annoying stuff in the book, there is this one moment in the story that's particularly annoying to me. First of all, Deja Thoris lays an egg, which, I guess it's part of their like biology or whatever, but it's just weird that she's like a human being and she lays eggs. She like lays an egg and they like put it in a box and they leave it out in the sun to hatch. And I don't know. It's just weird. It's just ridiculous. And it's not meant to be funny. It's just like anyway. That's not what my issue was. My issue comes with, the very end. Something goes wrong with that factory that uses the light to maintain the atmosphere and the oxygen and stuff. And so the entire planet is dying and suffocating. And John's been on this planet for 10 years at this point, and he just forgets that he's the only other guy on the entire planet, other than the guy who was running the thing that died, that knows how to stop it, that knows how to fix it, or at least open up the building so that somebody can get in there and fix it. Nobody can get through this building in time before everyone on the planet's going to suffer. And so he's just sitting there while his wife and Egg are his wife and Egg are suffocating, and his father-in-law and the rest of his family that he's made here on the planet is dying, and all the other millions of Martians are all just suffocating. And he's just sitting there like, oh man, this is a sad situation. And then only at the last minute he's like, oh yeah, I can stop this. It just bothers me. He should have known that. He should have remembered. I get that it's been a while and he does end up remembering it, whatever, but it just felt kind of unnecessary. How many thousands or millions of people had to die just so that it could be more intense? And because we as the reader know that he knows. So we're sitting there the whole time like, is he stupid? Is he just not gonna remember? I don't just yeah, it's a little annoying. And he dies because of it. If he had just remembered like 10 minutes before, he remembers it in the book. If he'd remembered just 10 minutes before that, he'd still be alive. But no, he dies, and well, he doesn't die, but he dies and he goes back to Earth and whatever. It kind of pissed me off, and I felt like with just a little bit of tweaking, it could have been done in a better way that wasn't so irritating. It definitely could have been much better. But yeah, anyways, that's it. That's all I've got for this one. I think it's good. I enjoy it. I think people should read it, especially if you're a fan of science fiction. This book inspired Carl Sagan. I mean, come on, it's great. It's a great book. Everyone loves it. Everyone who I know who have read it love it. Currently, I am about 80 pages into the Last Empire, the first of the original Mistborn trilogy. And those books are pretty long, so it's going to give me plenty of time. This is the last review that I have to do, officially the last review that I have to do before I can go back and redo my old typed out reviews that I had on my private social media. So the next review should be with The Old Breed by Eugene Sledge, one of my favorite books that I've ever read, period. Absolutely amazing. I think everyone should read it, especially if you're a fan of World War II history, or if you're a veteran. I think everyone should definitely read that book. Absolutely outstanding. And the reason I wasn't supposed to even do this review, but I picked up A Princess of Mars and I read it in 2 days. It took me 2 days to read this book. I was so used to reading extremely quickly with the Red Rising series, like 800-page books. This one was only like 300 pages, and so I breezed through it in 2 days easily. Plus, it was interesting enough that I just wanted to keep going. It does a really good job of keeping your attention. But yeah, that's all I got. And then once I finally catch up on these reviews, I'll only have to worry about doing one review per month. And so I can do other videos that I want to do in between my reviews, and I can finally start writing again. It's been a month since I wrote last because I've been concentrating on just hurrying up and getting these reviews out here so that I can have an archive about how I felt about these books. So in 20 years, I can look back, I can show my kids, my library of books. I'm trying to read 1,000 books here. I can show my kids my library of 1,000 books, and they can ask me, "Oh, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that?" Or if I'm dead, and my kids inherit my library, they can go, "Oh, I wonder how Dad felt about this book. I wonder how Dad felt about that book." Well, I got reviews for them up on YouTube. Just go through the old archives and scroll through. I don't know. It's the future. Who knows what people are going to be doing? But they can find and know exactly how I felt about these books. So that's part of the main reason why I'm doing this. But yeah, that's all I got. Thanks for making it to the end if you did. Adios.